Welcome back. First of all, could I encourage those of you that are on the sort of back few tables just to move forward a little bit? It just feels as though you're a long way away, and there's an awful lot of space here at the front. It will just make the speakers feel as though you're more in the room with them. So thank you very much for that. So it's my pleasure to introduce this next panel, which is going to share with you the Freeports and how they're transforming the manufacturing in Wales. Wales is very blessed to have a thriving high-value manufacturing industry, and we're absolutely delighted, and I'm happy to hand over to Janice Richards, who is the Make UK Membership Director. So she will be talking to her panellists, she'll introduce her panellists, but also will be telling you about the strength of Make UK and the membership that they have here in Wales, and just the contribution they're making to that high value manufacturing, which in turn is high value jobs and great opportunity for economic growth. So Janice, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm assuming this is on. I'm Janice Richards, and I'm the Membership Director for Wales for Make UK, the manufacturers organisation. We're a trade organisation that supports the manufacturing sector and have done for 130 years next year. We support businesses through our lobbying with government, through many initiatives that we have, and support packages that we also have. But my speakers today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they know far more about what they do than I do. So can I firstly introduce Toby Williams from the Cardiff Capital Region.
This is on now. Good afternoon, everybody. As Janice has said, Toby Williams from the Cardiff Capital Region. And my role within the Cardiff Capital Region as an organisation is leading the development of the investment zone, which we'll come to learn during the conversation is part of the modern industrial strategy zones, which Freeports and investment zones feature as part of UK government policy for local place-based economic regional growth.
And Andy Hunt from the Anglesey Freeport.
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andy Hunt. I'm the Interim Director of the Anglesey Freeport, which is a partnership between Stena Line, who are the port and ferry operator, and Anglesey County Council with a number of the local stakeholders. We've spent the last 3 years getting our various approvals in place. We're really close. So I've helped with that process, and now moving us into the operational delivery phase.
Great. So we have Freeports, as you know, in both North and South Wales. We also have investment zones in North and South Wales. And of course, there's the new announcements of the AI growth zones also. So indeed, Wales is open for business. So I'm going to start with a basic question. What is a Freeport?
That's a good question. So Freeports were originally from the previous Conservative government. They were part of the Levelling Up agenda. As Toby said, they're now squarely part of the new government's modern industrial strategy, and we're called an industrial strategy zone within the government. But we keep the use of the word Freeport in the brand because that's really well understood internationally, and people understand what a kind of a Freeport means. In the UK, there are three aims of the policy, really, is to make Freeports hubs for trade and investment, for innovation, and to promote jobs and regeneration. So it's three clear strands of what we're supposed to be doing, attracting investment, in particular in manufacturing, but not only in that, then supporting trade, imports and exports. There's a whole network of innovation activity supported by Connected Places Catapult, and then that kind of jobs and regeneration piece, which is a critical issue for us on Anglesey, given the closures of lots of big employers over the last sort of 15, 20 years. Freeports have tax sites. You can have up to 3 tax sites, up to 600 hectares. And in those tax sites, new investors into the sites get a number of tax breaks. So don't pay business rates rather for 5 years. There's exemptions from land transaction tax, and then there are various allowances for buildings and capital investments, and reductions in employers' national insurance contributions to encourage those jobs to come in. Alongside that, there are customs sites where certain duties are exempt for imports and exports, and where you get simplified procedures. And we've had a number of investors coming to us who are very interested in using Anglesey as a base for manufacture, importing raw materials, manufacturing, and then exporting them back out without paying any duty. In order to benefit from those things, there are certain criteria that businesses have to meet. So there needs to be additionality, not displacement. So we're not looking for retail businesses to move here to take advantage of the tax breaks, or indeed for manufacturing businesses just to move from A to B to get tax breaks. It has to be part of an expansion. And critically, it has to be in a number of target sectors. Each Freeport has its own sort of list of target sectors, which have been agreed with the UK and Welsh governments. And there's some big differences there. So, you know, if you go and look at Humber or Teesside, they've got big chemicals industries already there. In Anglesey, we're a roll-on, roll-off port. There isn't a huge amount of activity, so we've got a very different kind of focus. But there are also some broad similarities around green tech, low-carbon energy, and advanced manufacturing. And that support for net zero and the energy transition is something that's become more part of the agenda under the new government. So, in essence, tax breaks on some sites, custom sites and facilitation, and really a focus for investment in those kind of industrial strategy sectors that the government is wanting to bring forward.
Excellent. And following on from that question for Toby, what is an investment zone, and how would the investment zone work with the Freeport?
Yes, there's fundamentally some small differences. Now, if you take the policies themselves, they're quite similar in terms of the nature and scope. But fundamentally, building on what Andy has said, there's still this clear clustering effect that investment zones are trying to focus on. Now, within the regions of the UK, different clusters have effectively been identified as areas of strength. And I think it's for us, as a collective, both across Freeports and investment zones, to work together to make sure that we effectively have the best economic growth for Wales, but also the UK, and making sure that where there are similarities and there are opportunities to converge ideas and initiatives that we can. And I think fundamentally, if you take the policies themselves, there isn't, like I said, there's not a huge amount of difference, but the one thing which investment zones do have, which Freeports don't have, is the ability to apply capital and revenue flexibly. So across the different themes which you can effectively spend money in, across skills, research and innovation, infrastructure, there is this ability to actually bespokely create these interventions to target where there are clear barriers within your ecosystems. Whereas we do know that with Freeports, there is a lower quantity of that capital and revenue spend. Not saying that that's necessarily makes one better than the other, because again, they are very complementary in the way they're focused. But investment zones themselves as well, Freeports typically are, whether it's around an airport, whether it's a seaport, whereas investment zones typically are addressing, again, specific sectoral barriers. So you've seen a lot of investment zones set up across the UK around areas of strength, such as in Liverpool, where there is a clear pharma and life sciences angle. That's been clear and obvious. In North Wales alone, there's been an investment zone set up around what are the core strengths of advanced manufacturing. And then down here in South East Wales, the investment zone will be centred upon digital technology and advanced manufacturing, but with a core focus on our really strong semiconductor industry. So again, it's UK government almost backing really good winners, but also trying to develop those winners to make sure that the ecosystems that they're involved in, whether that be supply chains, whether that be the skills growth, can really make sure that they catch up with what is natural industrial growth in these areas.
It's fantastic. Thank you for explaining in a way I could never have done. So looking at Anglesey in particular, what is the focus of the Freeport given the AI growth zone plus the new small nuclear reactor announcement? How will you all work together for the good of the Freeport?
I think, I'm sort of slightly picking up on what Toby was just saying. In North Wales, and this is a big contrast with England and the English Freeports, there is much more regional collaboration and much more regional activity already taking place, be it around skills or innovation or whatever it may be. So we have a regular quarterly meeting with our colleagues in the North Wales investment zone to ensure that we're aligned. And from an inward investor's perspective, the 60 miles down the A55 is neither here nor there. If you're looking at an American city, they're basically the same place. And when we talk to investors, we get two questions: where are the skills and where's the supply chain? And the answer on the skills is across North Wales. And on the supply chain, it's principally in the manufacturing cluster around Wrexham, Flintshire and Deeside. So we see ourselves working very much in partnership. We're slightly jealous of the amount of capital funding you've got, but we are where we are. And in terms of the kind of focus we have, Holyhead was very badly hit by the trade flow changes after Brexit. So we've been very clear that a key part of this is restoring trade flows through the port and inward investment. Anglesey has almost no major private sector activity at the moment. The biggest private sector employer is Babcock, and they support RAF Valley, and the next biggest is Stena. So we're starting with a blank piece of paper. We don't have a chemicals industry that we're seeking to expand. So we've taken, well, what are our strengths? Where can we pitch ourselves to the market? And that's in a number of sectors. So we've got digital tech and data because of the fibre network that runs Dublin, Anglesey, inland and down to London. We're on that kind of transatlantic hub. And we're lucky enough to have energy and grid connections. So we're hoping to announce in the very near future a big technology park, 270,000 square metres, 500 megawatts. So that is the heart of the AI growth zone. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. We've got the legacy of nuclear skills and a lot of nuclear expertise, including the Bangor University, the Nuclear Futures Institute, in particular strengths around regulation. So we've had the Wilver announcement week before last, which is for 3 and potentially 8 small modular reactors. We had, in any case, been talking to a number of other SMR manufacturers who are very interested in coming to the island, taking advantage of the connectivity and that kind of skills legacy, and the test facilities that are on MSpark, the science park, are critical in that. So we're in advanced discussions with private provision or development of SMRs. And then on low carbon energy more generally, we've got the Morlice tidal array, which has consent for up to 240 megawatts. I think we've had 4 operators with 5 successful bids for the contracts for difference. So they're starting to deploy. I think that takes us up to about 25 megawatts, but plenty of scope for more. And then we've got advanced manufacturing and kind of agri-tech is our other sort of priority sector. The AI growth zone and the technology park is going to be a £2 billion investment, but it's not just in that. It's about bringing a load of jobs. So we expect there'll be about 1,000 jobs in research, in engineering, in data and monitoring attached to the tidal, but also creating a cluster, so taking the heat from the data center and using that in a vertical farm, producing plastic-free packaging, and wrapping all of that up with logistics to help restore that trade across the Irish Sea. A lot of that trade is the supermarket trade, so food in its various processed and unprocessed forms crisscrosses the Irish Sea, or at least used to before Brexit. So taking advantage of that kind of integration of those clusters and the customs facilitations that the Freeport offers means we hope to be able to restore Anglesey and North Wales to being a critical hub in food processing and distribution for the supermarkets on both sides of the Irish Sea.
A little known fact is that Anglesey is actually the second largest roll-on, roll-off port after Dover. Not too many people know that. So the question around both Freeports, north and south, is are they creating new trade corridors or strengthening existing ones?
Both, hopefully. So, you know, in particular, Dublin to Holyhead is a well-established trade corridor, and it then goes on across England and over onto the continent. And one of the things we want to do is to make that trade easier. Now, the government's doing various things in terms of a deal with the EU on food and drink and plants, etc. But we are looking at innovative solutions such as digital trade corridors, working with English Freeports to look at how technology can help ease the flow of goods and ease that inspection and kind of policy regime to allow us to bring back that free movement of goods that we had kind of before Brexit. So very much kind of re-establishing that as the preferred route from Ireland into the UK and beyond that onto continental Europe. But at the same time, we want new trade and new routes. And the port is talking to other ports around the Mediterranean in particular about how we use the Freeport to generate those new routes. And then the other element is that manufacturing base that I mentioned earlier. So we're in discussion with a number of the tidal operators. What we want, our sort of ideal investment is tidal manufacturers who don't just do the deployments in Anglesey and offshore, but they bring with it the R&D, the HQ, the manufacturing, the monitoring, the evaluation, the product testing, and all of that comes. And we don't make the mistake as a country that we made perhaps with offshore wind, where we lost a lot of the value chain and its imports of the turbines or the blades or whatever it may be. There's a real opportunity in tidal here in this, you know, it's the biggest consented array in Europe. There's a real opportunity for the UK as a whole to grab that value chain. And we're talking to a number who are interested in bringing manufacturing to a customs site on Anglesey that then allows them to export to the rest of Europe and in particular to North America. So we're really excited that, you know, hopefully we'll land some of that. We don't expect we'll land all of it, but that we'll get at least one of those manufacturing plants, and North Wales becomes a hub for the production of the tidal turbines that we can then export around the world.
Truly excited. Yeah, no, carry on.
I was going to add to that further, really, just to say that, you know, while Freeports obviously, you know, are going to be delivering significant opportunity for the export market and trade, I think there's a dovetailing here with investment zones where there's this natural opportunity for us to harness some of the things which you've mentioned, Andy, around, you know, how can we make sure that Wales becomes a HQ for some of these companies? How can we make sure that we don't just become an exporter? You know, I think if you take the industries that we're looking and focusing our investment zone on in South East Wales, you know, it's very export heavy. Yes, that has great benefits, you know, and that is fantastic. But also, how can we make sure we onshore more of that value chain so we don't just become reliant on other countries to be able to produce some of the core ingredients that we need for these technologies, such as tidal, such as offshore energy? How can we make sure that we are becoming that place for not only manufacturing, because again, we can't necessarily compete on a cost level sometimes with manufacturing, and we fully understand that. But where's our niche? Where's our particular avenue where we can attract more value chain opportunities? And you know, that really is around, I think, the innovation and the research angle that we have and the strengths that we have both in North and South Wales. And again, it just shows how these two policies, and why I suppose government have put them as modern industrial zones, because you effectively can see that they can intertwine and deliver a greater benefit and impact.
Indeed, the Wales PLC badge. Yeah, absolutely. And with you, Toby, talk to us about the skills that both the Freeport and the investment zones can help to creating new technologies, green technology, innovation. Where are those skills going to come from?
No, absolutely. Like Andy referenced earlier, you know, one of the first things any inward investor asks is, where is your skills base? You know, and what value can that give to me as an organisation? And I think, you know, ultimately, both policies have a great initiative to put forward a more significant and deeper pool of talent for everywhere across Wales. And one thing that I think we were able to do with our engineering bases that we have in South Wales especially, but North Wales is exactly the same. You know, we've got the opportunity to make sure that we embed and make sure that they're deeper and more ingrained in thinking. So when we're taking things like, you know, our engineering talent base, how can we make sure that we're not just focusing on the near-term opportunities? Can we make sure that the skills are developed in line with where industry trends are going? So, you know, one of the biggest things we're facing with engineering firms currently is that digitalization and this transfer into new arenas which may not be comfortable with. They may not typically have had any AI activity. And actually, how can we make sure that the future generations that are coming through are skilled in a way which can adapt to these oncoming trends? Because that's one thing I think that we need to make sure is that as we develop core manufacturing bases, and that's across all industries, that the actual skills and talent is there for us to effectively move forward with growth. When we're talking about the green agenda as well, and I think, you know, green tech especially, you know, most of the engineering skills that we require are probably out there. But again, it's about how do we make sure that our education system is able to bring forward this talent in an appropriate way which serves industry. Because quite often you do see there are some disparity between, you know, whether it be curriculum or other things and what truly industry needs. And I think it's a responsibility for us collectively, whether that be Freeports or investment zones, to make sure that they converge so industry is directly feeding into that curriculum moving forward, to make sure that, again, we stay on top of these trends, particularly when we're talking around the digital trends that we've faced in the last couple of years.
I completely agree with all of that. As I said earlier, I think Wales has a big advantage over England here in the kind of the regional structures, and certainly in North Wales with Ambition North Wales and the regional skills partnership. There's infrastructure there that we can work with. We also benefit from the legacy of the unsuccessful proposals that Hitachi brought forward, because there was big investment in the college and in that kind of skills infrastructure as well. I think it's really important that, you know, we acknowledge and build on that and hopefully avoid the same fate of marching people up the hill just to march them down again. It's critical that we actually deliver now. But I think, as I say, this is an area where Wales is probably ahead of England and has real advantage, that when an inward investor calls, we can say, well, here's our regional skills plan, here's all the things that we're doing, here's where you fit into that, here's where we can adapt that. And that's a really important part of the offer. As I said, skills and supply chain is the two questions. They take the tax breaks for granted, obviously, because that's why they've come to our door. But beyond that, it's very much about that human capital and business capital in the area.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, capital infrastructure is one thing, but, you know, the engine for growth is down to the people, the individuals. I think, you know, again, these initiatives are great in terms of being able to put capital infrastructure in place. But we can't forget the fact that we do need those programs in order to be able to operate. We need to be able to make sure that, again, we are fueling that system and not just relying on maybe where we have elsewhere and previously with other, let's say, enterprise zones in the past, just focused on the capital. You know, we really do need to make sure that, again, these programs generate the best for the regional economy, because ultimately, again, you know, skills these days, they transfer across borders. You know, whether that be local authority boundaries, whether that be north to South Wales, we've really got an opportunity to try and make sure that the skills base can be dispersed, and, you know, the benefits for both, you know, Freeports and investment zones can reach those corners of our regions where maybe those opportunities haven't been had in the past. And again, not just delivering economic value, but making sure the social element is brought forward as well, because that is fundamental to make sure we become more prosperous as a country.
Our most valuable asset, our staff, yeah. We all know we do great things in Wales, but sometimes we're like the best kept secret. How do we ensure that these initiatives are out there so inward investors can see what we're doing?
That's a good question. There's no one solution fits all, is there? But I think there is a responsibility, I think, on Wales PLC to step forward as a unison. I don't think we can afford as a nation to be advertising our various initiatives separately. I think we do need to come together as a unified voice. How we do that is a different matter. But I think we've got the relationships within the country to make sure that we can drive that forward. And I think that's the critical thing, is making sure that the dialogue remains, so that if there is significant inward investment opportunities happening in the Anglesey Freeport, then actually how does that benefit also meet the Celtic Freeport, meet the investment zone down here in South East Wales? Can we actually guide Welsh Government strategy, industrial strategy now, to make sure that we are making sure that, again, all layers of government understand the value in which these investments have been put in place?
Yeah, again, I'd agree with all that. I think to an extent that there's some of what the WDA used to do happens, but in perhaps a slightly more fragmented way. And I do think the industrial strategy zones is a means by which some of that can be pulled together. I have to say the support we've had from trade and investment colleagues in the Welsh Government and in the UK Government has been fantastic, and we're being linked with lots of great investment opportunities. I think, as I say, we're working closely with the North Wales Investment Zone, and we're really thinking about this in a more sectoral way. So we've got nuclear, we've got AI and digital, and we've got tidal, and that's how the investment market is coming to us. It's quite sort of segmented. So I do think there's something about what is the Wales-wide position on tidal and seeking investment in tidal, which is not just about Anglesey, that is about the kind of supply chain as well. And similarly on nuclear, previous work, did a lot of work for Hinkley Point C. There is a huge number of South Wales companies that are involved in the Hinkley Point C supply chain, and a huge number of South Wales workers in that supply chain. That's a real platform on which to build as we move into the SMR world. There's obviously some differences there, but there's some core skills both in the supply chain and in the workforce that Wales can capitalise on. I think the final point really is about energy and energy costs. And given the amount of energy that's being deployed off the coast of Wales and across Wales, and the ability to do things behind the meter, that's one of the key parts of us being able to launch the technology park. Is we've got a grid connection, but in time we want to move things behind the meter direct from low carbon sources, and that kind of plethora of energy investment in Wales can be made to benefit Wales industry. So it's not simply exported to the grid, or capacity fees are being paid, but that's being used for making hydrogen, or SAFs, or supporting data centres, whatever it may be. The original Wilver power station was linked to the aluminium smelting plant, and it provided base load. And it was a mutually beneficial relationship, and obviously when Wilver closed, the aluminium smelter closed because it wasn't economic anymore. And that relationship between nuclear and AI and data centre is the modern equivalent of that. And we hope we get another 30 years out of it.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add on Andy's points really, is that, all the sectors that you just referenced, all the development opportunities that you've got, it's very similar in South Wales, and I think it's important that we don't have, competition is good in some ways, but I think it's important that we don't necessarily compete where there are clear strengths of difference. So we actually are, complementing each other rather than, again, trying to chase the same inward investment opportunities, whether it be North or South Wales. And it's about how do we make sure that, SMR activity up in Anglesey on Wilver actually complements potential schemes that we might have emerging down in South Wales. Because again, it's a fundamental enabler energy. And, we're going to have an array of SMRs across probably the nation, that being the UK. And it's about actually how do we make sure that these supply chains talk to one another across these different regions, and make sure that, again, we don't just displace jobs and businesses for the sake of it. We actually make sure that, again, there's a coordination from more government and regional level where we can have the greater impact. It's effectively, I think, what we need to do and ensure we do.
Agreed. I think it's the connectivity that we have in Wales, which is quite unique.
And I think another point there is it's not just connectivity. The connectivity is one piece, but actually, when there is clear research and innovation opportunity, how can companies that are establishing in South Wales benefit from the activity in North Wales? A lot of, I think, the growth areas which, you referenced, Andy, still quite research intensive, in its nature. So again, how do we make sure that the supply chain keeps up with that? I don't have the answers. I don't think anyone does have the answers, but I think that's our responsibility as a collective, is to make sure we do start making the challenges known.
I totally agree. I think it is one of our unique features in Wales that we all know each other. We are connected well. We do collaborate well, and we don't need to be in competition with each other. I'm going to take questions from the audience in a second. So if you could have a think, we'll got a roaming mic for you. Is there anyone with a question? Oh, come on. Somebody? I'm going to have to go to my backup otherwise. Does anyone have a question? No? I'm going to throw something out, and that is, how do we ensure that the local communities benefit from these initiatives that are huge initiatives in a big country, the whole of Wales? How do those local communities really benefit from it?
I personally think it's about making sure that our strengths are rooted where those communities are. So we don't, again, probably go back to that displacement point, is we make sure that where industries are strong, and again, if you take South East Wales as an example, we've got really good, strong manufacturing companies across the region. They're not congregated along the M4 corridor necessarily. They go all the way up to Merthyr and beyond. And I think it's a case of making sure that we focus the activity where it's best placed. And again, it goes back down to the skills point, where it's not about moving these skills to different places in a region. It's making sure that the right and appropriate skills provision is provided at that point where they can best utilize it. So naturally, we want to make sure that they do congregate around their areas of strength, again, because the skills base is going to be able to really focus around a growth opportunity. Take defence in South East Wales as an example. We've got a significant number of defence companies up in the north of the valleys area. And again, what we've got is a really good community and network of further education colleges who really are ingrained with the engineering needs of that cluster. So how do we make sure that we, again, focus and target the investments so we don't have displacement, and we really do make sure that benefit is achieved at that community level?
I think from Anglesey and kind of North Wales point of view, Anglesey's been losing younger working age people over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And it's not just 18-year-olds going to university and not coming back. It goes all the way up to kind of 30, 35-year-olds having to leave the island for work. And that itself causes a break in community, and in particular around the Welsh language, because it's matched by an inflow of people who are coming there to retire, who are not always coming home to retire. They're not necessarily Welsh speakers. So simply providing jobs and career opportunities in well-paid work on the island will help with that, and help. It will attract people back. We saw that when Hitachi were promoting Wilver. The number of people I met on that project who had careers all around the world, and they saw the opportunity to kind of come home, and then others who saw the opportunity to have a really good career staying on the island. At the moment, around a third of the Anglesey workforce commutes off the island every day. Again, overwhelmingly for well-paid work. So there is simple community benefit in providing well-paid jobs and career paths at large businesses that will deliver benefit, but that's not enough. We've got to go beyond that. And as I say, partly the legacy of the previous plans for Wilver is a really good college that's really attuned to the local business community and the supply chain. And we have to make sure that these big developments are done in a way which doesn't adversely affect the community. These are big construction projects, 3,000 construction workers. I think there's about 1,200 construction workers on the island at the moment, so it's a sort of trebling of the construction workforce, many of whom will commute onto the island or will live on the island temporarily. All of that's got to be handled really well. And then we've got to provide that escalator for people with no skills and low skills and those entering the workforce to increase, and those who are in but at sort of mid-levels to progress as well. So it's not about taking a 16-year-old kid and making them a nuclear standard welder, but it's putting them on the path to being that in 10 or 15 years' time, and that's a big effort, and will take a lot of public and private sector resource to do.
There's the knock-on effect then, of course, with so many people moving onto the island, spending their money on the island, the small businesses benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've just done some modelling, and the Freeport and Wilver will generate 5,500 direct jobs on the island. The spending of those people and those supply chains will add another 4,500 on the island. So, you know, we could add 10,000 jobs. There's only 23,000 jobs now. So it's a 45% increase in employment over the next sort of 15, 20 years. But on top of that, the modelling shows that it's another 1,000 or so in Gwynedd, a few hundred more in Conway, just because of how those spending patterns and supply chains will ripple out. So, you know, it's a big deal for Anglesey, but it's a big deal for North Wales in terms of, you know, just the general prosperity. And I don't know, you know, again, Hinkley Point C, if anyone went to Bridgewater in Somerset 15 years ago, it was terribly deprived. It was out of all keeping with everything around it in Somerset, and now it's booming, frankly. I mean, the levels of worklessness are really low. There's been private sector investment in really difficult to develop sites, new hotels opening. Like it's utterly transformed the prospects of the town, and we look forward to more of the same on Anglesey.
And I think, you know, one of the core elements there is making sure that, you know, the economy is changing for the better, I suppose. You know, these jobs that aren't just, again, high value jobs, but you are seeing the economies of scale in a way where there's also this almost transferring, I suppose, of the economy from maybe more seasonal based to a more longer, let's say, a longevity across the rest of the year. Again, we have the same situation in South East Wales, where, you know, tourism is obviously significant. Tourism is naturally the biggest industry in North Wales as well. But, you know, how do we make sure that we have a more, I suppose, robust economy across the whole year, rather than just potentially seasonal? And I think that's a huge differentiator for local communities where those job opportunities are, again. And it's not about necessarily high value jobs. That is down to all sorts of levels of jobs. And I think that's critically important. Another factor that we have in South East Wales is, you know, particularly around the industry that we're looking at for the investment zone, is that there's potentially up to 50% of the workforce going to be retired in the next, we're talking even 5 to 10 years. And again, how do we make sure that there's the aspiration for these up and coming generations to have these type of jobs? Because I think that's one of the things, and I can't comment on North Wales, but in South East Wales, I think there's this real opportunity to make sure we do inspire the next generation to have these high value jobs, and make sure that, you know, they realise they're capable of being in these industries. Sometimes it's difficult to even see these industries. You know, they are hidden. You know, take the semiconductor industry in South East Wales. It's not the most visible, and if you weren't in the industry, you probably wouldn't really know it's there. And again, how do you make sure that the individual, whether that be in Cardiff or whether that be in Merthyr Tydfil, understands that that industry is there and open and growing? And I think that's a responsibility, again, of ourselves to make sure, and I think everyone in the room, to make sure that these real great opportunities are unearthed.
That's fantastic. Does anyone have any questions? Anything at all? We will be around later if you want to speak individually, if you don't want to put your hand up. Sarah, shall I invite you back to the stage?
Janice, thank you very much indeed, and hopefully everyone was inspired. I think the Freeports and the opportunity it brings to both North Wales and South Wales are phenomenal. We've got great opportunities in both of those areas to really grow. And the number of jobs you're talking about in Anglesey, I mean, that's fantastic, absolutely fantastic, which means, as I said, the local economy will have that additional opportunity to grow, and hopefully we see that in South Wales as well. Port Talbot, which is very close to my heart, has that sort of opportunity to regenerate, which is amazing. So Andy, Toby and Janice, maybe put your hands together and thank them for their time. Really thank you. So we've come to the end of the formal sort of session, so thank you for your time, thank you for the attention that you've given it, thank you to the sponsors, to all the speakers we've had on this stage today, and for the information they've shared, and hopefully they've inspired you. And as I said, these speakers will be staying around, so please do catch them as you go out. Whilst the main programme is over, the bar is open. So that's the most important thing, and the main hall will have an open bar till 7 p.m. So we encourage you to stay, we encourage you to network, and I hope we'll see you back here tomorrow bright and breezy. Thank you very much for your time.